Okay, so last class we discussed the quantity theory of money, and we concluded that there exists direct and proportional relationship between money supply, growth rate, and inflation rate in the economy. Okay, so if money supply growth rate increases by 5%, then inflation rate will also increase by 5% if there is no change in real output growth rate. Okay, because if you change your money supply, then real output will not change, because real output depends on the factors of production and technology. So if there is change in factors, change in labor, change in capital, or change in technical knowledge, then real output will change. Therefore, if you are changing money supply, then money supply will not change real output. Money supply will change the prices. So if there is growth rate in money supply, there will be growth rate in prices, which is called inflation rate. So if we increase money supply by some proportion, inflation rate will also increase by that proportion. So from this money quantity theory of money, we can say that the countries with higher money growth rate, they should have higher inflation rate, and the long run trend behavior of a country's inflation should be similar to the long run trend behavior of the money growth rate. So then the data was collected for money supply growth rate and inflation rate for different economies, and we got this graph. Okay, you can see. So here we have money supply growth, and here we have inflation rate. So you can see that the countries with higher money supply growth rate, okay, you see this Turkey, it has a high, and the inflation rate is also high. Indonesia also, you can see that money supply growth rate is high and inflation rate. And then Singapore, money supply growth rate is low, so inflation rate is also low. Same as United States and Switzerland. So these are the countries where we have. So you can see this scatter plot. There is a positive relationship between money supply growth rate and inflation rate in the economy. Then we have the concept of seniorage. Okay, this concept seniorage. Whenever government want to make expenditures, so they impose taxes to finance their expenditure. So if government cannot generate enough revenue from taxes to finance their expenditure, then they can use this seniorage, and this means government raise revenue from printing money. Okay, so they ask central bank to print money, and with that printed money, government make expenditure. They buy goods and services. Okay, now particularly those economies that are not documented, this practice is more, like developing countries where people are not paying taxes, and where the economy is not documented, and it is difficult to trace people for taxes, and the tax evasion and tax avoidance is there. So then government use this, they print money, and then this printing money could be considered as inflation tax, because if you print money, then that printed money is used to buy goods and services from the economy, and then less goods and services will be available, for the people when they rush to the market to buy the goods and services, then this will put a pressure on prices to go up, and there will be inflation rate in the economy. So this means inflation is a tax. So people were not paying the taxes, so government printed the money, and then government made their expenditures, and then when people go to the market, they will pay higher prices. So that higher price is basically a tax which they pay to the government. Okay, and this is called inflation tax. So inflation is also considered as a tax. So you can see in developing countries, inflation rate is high. Even in our country, you can see that inflation rate is now in double digit, more than 10%. So this means government is using this tool, seniorage, and they are printing money and imposing inflation tax on people. And also there is a relationship between inflation and interest rate. Okay, so we have nominal interest rate represented by I, and this is not adjusted for inflation. And then we have real interest rate, which is R, and the real interest rate equals nominal interest rate minus inflation rate. Now if the nominal interest rate is 10%, inflation rate is 7%, so this means the real interest rate would be 3%. Now in some economies, this real interest rate is negative. So when real interest rate would be negative? Yes, anyone can answer? Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So give me the answer. When real interest rate would be negative?
When inflation rate exceeds nominal interest rate.
Yes, when inflation rate is higher than the nominal interest rate. So what about in our country? In our country, suppose if we say that interest rate is 7% and inflation rate is 10%. So this means the real interest rate is what?
Negative 3.
Yes, minus 3%. Okay. So it means people are getting negative returns on their deposits. So if the deposit rate is 7%, inflation rate is 10%, so it means we are getting negative return on our deposits. And then we have Fisher equation. Fisher equation is just you readjust this relationship, and which says that nominal interest rate equals the real interest rate plus inflation rate. So nominal interest rate is the sum of real interest rate and inflation rate, and from here you can derive real interest rate, which is nominal interest rate minus inflation rate. So this equation is a very popular equation, and in chapter 3 we learn that saving equals investment, and this determines the real interest rate. Okay, and the saving is what? Saving is supply of loanable fund, and investment is demand for loanable fund. So in the loanable fund market, last time in chapter 3 we discussed that the supply of loanable fund and demand for loanable fund will determine the real interest rate. So this means in this equation, real interest rate will change, okay, if there is a change in supply of loanable fund or demand for loanable fund. Okay. So if there is change in inflation rate, so this will not change. Okay. So this will change the nominal interest rate. So an increase in inflation causes an equal increase in nominal interest rate. Okay, so this is the Fisher effect. So this means if we increase inflation rate by 5%, nominal interest rate will also increase by 5%. So there is a relationship, no? One for one relationship, and this one for one relationship between inflation rate and nominal interest rate is called Fisher effect. Because when this is changing, this will not change real interest rate. Real interest rate will only change when there is change in supply of loanable fund or demand for loanable fund. And here is the graph which shows the relationship between inflation rate and nominal interest rate. And you can see when inflation rate is high, for example in Romania, Bulgaria, Zimbabwe, you can also see that nominal interest rate is also high. So, and when inflation rate is low, just like Switzerland, Germany, and then nominal interest rate is also low. So again, this shows, this is a scatter plot for the actual data shows a positive relationship between inflation rate and nominal interest rate. So that's why, you know, when inflation rate is increasing, we see that there is also increase in nominal interest rate. So in our case also, when inflation rate was more than 10%, then our nominal interest rate was also very high. And when inflation rate is decreasing, the nominal interest rate will also decrease. Now I'm giving you an exercise. Okay, I will give you some numbers and then you have to answer the questions. So these are the numbers. That velocity is constant. Money is growing at 5% per year. Okay, so money supply growth rate is 5%. This is real output. Growth rate is 2%. Okay, Y is growing at 2%, and real interest rate equals 4. Now the question is, what would be the nominal interest rate? So just calculate nominal interest rate and write in the chat. Write your answer in the chat. Okay, did you get the answer? When you get the answer, just unmute your mic and give me the answer. And also write in the chat.
7.
7 है? Nominal interest rate is 7. Okay, any other answer?
7.
7?
7.
7. Okay, 7 है?
Yes, sir, 7. Yes, sir, 7 order.
Okay, let's look at the answer. when we have this data, first we will find the inflation rate, which is money supply growth rate minus real output growth rate, because we are using this equation. Yeah. Inflation equals money supply growth rate and growth rate of real output. So we use this equation. First we will find the inflation rate. So money supply growth rate is 5%, real output growth rate is 2%, so 5 minus 2 is 3%. So inflation rate is 3%. Now we know that this nominal interest rate equals real interest rate plus inflation rate. So 4 is the real interest rate, 3 is the inflation rate. So then nominal interest rate is 7%. So your answer is correct. Now the second question is, if the central bank, if the Fed increases the money growth rate by 2% percentage point per year, then what would be the change in interest rate, nominal interest rate? Yes, what would be your answer? Yes, any answer? This is very easy.
0.
0? If money growth rate increases by 2 percentage point.
9.
Just recall Fisher effect.
अगर मनी ग्रोथ रेट इंक्रीज होगा तो ये भी इंक्रीज होगा.
Yes, sir, 2%.
2%. Nominal interest
Yes,
rate will also increase by 2%. Explain your answer. Yes. Answer.
जिस स्पीड से मनी ग्रोथ रेट बढ़ेगा उसी स्पीड से इन्फ्लेशन भी बढ़ेगा. बता दीजिए.
Okay. You can look at here. Fisher effect, na? When money supply growth rate increases, inflation rate will also increases, okay, and then nominal interest rate will also increase. I will show you here the answer. This will also be 2%, same as increase in money growth rate, because when your money supply growth rate increases, it will not affect the real interest rate. It will directly affect the nominal interest rate. No? This is Fisher equation. Because the real interest rate depends on the supply of loanable fund and demand for loanable fund. So when money supply increases, it will not affect the real output. So from here we can say that when money supply increases by 2%, inflation rate will increase by 2%, because real output depends on factors of production and technology. So when this increases by 2%, so when inflation rate increases, the nominal interest rate will also increases by 2%, because real interest rate depends on supply of loanable fund and demand for loanable fund. So your answer is correct. Then the third question is, suppose that the growth rate of real output falls by 1%. So what will happen to inflation and what will happen to yes, what will happen to inflation, and then what central bank should do if they want to keep inflation rate constant. यस, क्या करना चाहिए? इन्फ्लेशन रेट पे क्या इफेक्ट पड़ेगा? नो आंसर? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will give you the answer. So these two we discussed. So if the central bank is doing nothing, and if there is a decrease in real output growth rate by 1%, so inflation will increase by 1%. Okay. So here we can see. Let me show you. Again we have to go. So this is, there is no change in money supply, and when this is decreased by 1% mean minus 1%, so minus 1 multiplied by minus, so it will increase by plus 1%. So inflation will increase by plus 1% if the real output decreases by 1%. Then what central bank should do to keep the inflation rate constant? What we have to do? If real output is decreasing by 1%, we want to keep inflation rate constant. So what central bank should do? Yes, any answer? अगर ये काम हो रहा है 1% रियल आउटपुट ग्रोथ रेट, तो इन्फ्लेशन रेट 1% बढ़ रहा है, उसको काउंटर करने के लिए हमें क्या करना चाहिए?
मनी सप्लाई कम कर देंगे.
Yes. Okay, so we have to reduce the money supply. To prevent inflation from rising, so central bank should reduce money supply growth rate by 1% if there is a decrease in real output by 1%. Okay, good. Now we have two real interest rates. This inflation rate is actual inflation rate, and which is not known until it has occurred. So if something is not known, I don't know after 1 year what would be the inflation rate in the economy. Okay, because if it is 2020, so 2021, this is July 2020, and then in July 2021 I will know what was the inflation rate. So if you don't know something, this means you will make expectations. Okay, so we have expected inflation. So we have actual inflation rate and we have expected inflation. So I am just expecting that inflation rate between 2020 July to 2000, by the end of 2021 July would be suppose 8%. This is expected inflation. Now my expectations could be wrong, could be correct. Sometimes you over expect. I am expecting 8%, but actual inflation rate is 6%. Sometimes we underestimate. I am expecting 8%, but actual inflation is 12%. Because we don't know the growth rate of money supply. The growth rate of money supply figure is not disclosed by the central bank. Because if it is disclosed, okay, next year this would be the growth rate of money supply, and then people will start expecting the inflation rate. So because we have two inflation rate, so we have two real interest rate. So real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus inflation rate. Now we have expected inflation and actual inflation. So if the nominal interest rate is, from nominal interest rate we subtract the expected inflation, so this is x on real interest rate. This is called x on real interest rate. The real interest rate people expect at the time they buy a bond. Now if I am buying a bond or I am depositing my money, so I know what is the real nominal interest rate. Suppose it is 10%. Now what would be the real interest rate? So this is x aunt would be that I am expecting, if I am getting nominal interest rate 10% and I am expecting inflation rate would be 8%, so my x aunt real interest rate would be 2%. Then we have exposed real interest rate. This is the nominal interest rate minus actual interest. So the real interest rate, which is actually realized. No? So if I am expecting 8% inflation rate and actual inflation rate is also 8%, so it means my exposed real interest rate would be 2%. But this is, so ex ante real interest rate and ex post real interest rate, they would both be same when both would be same, ex ante real interest rate and ex post. कब दोनों सेम होंगे रियल इंटरेस्ट रेट? Yes.
When expected inflation rate and actual inflation rate equals.
Yes, excellent. When expected inflation rate equals actual, when expected inflation rate equals actual inflation rate, then our ex ante real interest rate would be same as ex post. Yeah. But you know, it's very difficult, no? Your expectations about future are exactly the same. What will happen after in the future when it is realized? Then money demand, we have to include in our money demand function the interest rate. So money demand we discussed was a function of what? Previously we discussed that money demand is a function of what? अब तक जो हमने डिस्कस किया था, पिछला जो हमने मॉडल था, so money demand was a function of what?
Real income?
Yes, real income. No? Money demand was a function of real income. So in quantity theory of money, the demand for real money balances depends only on real income. Okay. Another determinant of money demand is the nominal interest rate. So nominal interest rate is another determinants of money demand. And why this is a determinant of money demand? Because this is the opportunity cost of holding money. So basically the interest rate is the opportunity cost of holding money. If you are holding cash, this means you are not getting the interest, and this is the cost of holding money. If the nominal interest rate is 10% and you are holding, suppose 1 lakh rupees, so this means the cost of holding 1 lakh rupees for 1 year is 10,000 rupees, which is foregone, and you are holding your money in the form of cash. Otherwise, you can keep your money in some deposits or in some bonds or some other interest bearing assets. So what type of relationship would you expect between the money balances and the nominal interest rate? कैसा होगा relationship, positive होगा या negative?
Sir, I think negative होगा.
Negative होगा ना. और income के साथ तो पता है आपको, मनी डिमांड का इनकम रियल इनकम के साथ रिलेशनशिप. Okay, so there is a negative relationship between nominal interest rate and real money demand. So when real interest rate increases, real money demand will decrease because it will be more costly to hold money. लेकिन अगर 10% से 15% हो जाए, so this means the cost of holding money is 15,000 for 1 lakh rupees for 1 year. So if the interest rate is low, suppose 10% say 5% हो जाए, तो this is just 5,000 for 1 lakh, the cost of holding money. So when interest rate is high, nominal interest rate is high, real money demand would be low. People would prefer to hold less cash in their hands, and they will put their money in some interest bearing assets. So this is the real money demand, which is a function of nominal interest rate and real output, and this L is for liquidity. Okay, so real money demand depends on nominal interest rate negatively, and this nominal interest rate is the opportunity cost of holding money, and it depends positively on real output, and higher is the real output, more real demand for money because people want to make transaction. So if there is more income or more output, so then there will be more demand for money because people want to make transactions. So for higher income or output, there will be more spending, and so they need more money. So L is used for the money demand function because money is the most liquid assets. We have other assets, but they are not most liquid, less liquid. They are less liquid. But this money demand is the most liquid asset. Then when people are deciding whether to hold money or bonds, they don't know what inflation will turn out to be. So because nominal interest rate equals the real interest rate plus expected inflation. So this means real money demand depends on the real interest rate and expected inflation. So nominal interest rate relevant for money demand. Okay, this is. And for equilibrium, we have the supply of real money, and then we have demand for real money. And there will be equilibrium when the supply of real money balances equals demand for real money balances. So here money supply is exogenous, which is determined by the central bank. Okay, and the real interest rate would be determined by the loanable fund market through the supply of loanable fund and demand for loanable fund through saving and investment. And then real output is determined by the factors of production and the technology. So it is determined by capital and labor and technology. And so this means in this equation, this is exogenous, this is determined by loanable fund market, this is determined by production function, okay, and this is the expectations that people are making. So to get the equilibrium, the adjustment factor is the price. So price will adjust to bring equilibrium in the money market in this case. Okay, so whenever there is a disequilibrium in this money market, price is the adjustment factor. So price will adjust to make equilibrium in the money market. And how price will respond to change in money supply? So because these are given, real interest rate, real income, and expected inflation is given. So this means a change in money supply causes a change in price. Okay, and this is by the same percentage as we discussed in the quantity theory of money. So here again, if there is a change in money supply, there will be a change in price by the same percentage. So again, we can say that there is a direct relationship between money supply and price level. Just we discuss in case of quantity theory of money. So even if we introduce this real interest rate, this relationship hold that whenever there is a change in money supply, there will be a change in price in the same proportion. Okay, so I will stop here today, and in the next class we will discuss more about the expected inflation.